Rated T for Teen.
What's up, everyone? I'm Modus Community Manager Luke Croft, and for this year's Steam Next Fest, I had the opportunity to sit down with two members of the We Create Stuff team, the studio behind upcoming psychological horror game In Sound Mind. Concept artist Josh Culp and texture artist slash animator Pedro Calvo sat down with me to discuss the art direction of In Sound Mind as well as their process for creating the game's main villain, who we refer to throughout the stream as the Mysterious Man. So check out this interview, and if you're interested, try the In Sound Mind demo on Steam right now. Enjoy. I'm always curious when
Yeah.
I'm talking about the development of art in a game, kind of how you guys arrive at what that north star of the art direction is, right? Like that thing you kind of look at and say, this is what we're aiming to do. Everything that we create, we kind of want it to reflect these themes or follow this motif. For you guys, what was that? How was that initial direction set? Was that kind of a collaborative effort where that entire team came together and said, we want to move in this direction? Or did Hen kind of start with his concept and then pass that to everybody else?
So I came to the team a little later. Some of the initial concepts were done by a different artist before I joined. Um, the mysterious man we're going to be talking about today is one of the first things that I did coming on to the team, and so a lot of the art direction had been set before that. But so far as I know, and kind of throughout the entire process, I feel like Hen, our creative director, has just had a really clear picture of what he does and doesn't like. He knew he wanted the game to be less dark and grim. So there's like a colorful aspect to the game and like a playfulness. I think even when things are scary, it doesn't feel quite as like dreadful and hopeless as some other games have felt. And I think a lot of that is through the art direction that Hen's kind of set for us. And so I don't know if some of those decisions were made by other members of the team before I got there, but in my time with We Create Stuff, Hen has been just very clear in like what he does and doesn't want for the game, and I think it shows through in a lot of the art. I think that the mysterious man we're going to be talking about today, I think his design also set the tone for a lot of the rest of the game. And I guess we'll get into that more in a bit, but his design is, I think, really toes the balance between being creepy and also not being sort of playful, or playful might not be the right word, but I don't know. There's something a little lighter about him, even while he's actively scary.
Yeah, I think when we first onboarded In Sound Mind here at Modus, and I saw the initial kind of logo that you guys were using as kind of the promo art for the game, that's the thing that stuck out to me. It was like it wasn't this like dark and, like you said, grim kind of blood dripping from the walls kind of horror. There was like a lot of purples, a lot of blues, and it actually matched your background quite nicely there, Josh. That original logo concept, and even the key art now, which we'll look at in a little bit, super bright. A lot of colors going on there. Like it's not a traditional kind of what we would think more as like a survival horror now, where it's haunted mansion and overgrown, nothing's taken care of. And as you play through even the available demo, you'll notice that there's a lot of playfulness with the colors as well.
Yeah, actually, since the beginning of this project, I was here. I was here like a little bit before, but yeah, since the beginning, the concept demo, and not talking about this demo in specific, but back then when we were trying things out, Ken had already that idea in his mind that basically he it's like a horror game, but there's some light elements to it. So, and I think that's really cool because it counterbalances, because like I guess like most of horror games are a bit too dark, and I think it's cool to have some lightness as well. And I think, yeah, and I think that was actually a really good idea for the concept of the game. That's not on me. That's not on me. That's on him. But yeah.
Yeah, but you can definitely tell jumping in.
But it ended up being
Yeah, you can definitely tell jumping into the demo or even just kind of looking at the videos that are out there. Like Insound Mind is trying to do something a little different in the horror space, especially different from a lot of kind of the modern takes on horror. And in fact, some of the gameplay elements are probably a little more classic style horror games, really focused on puzzles and stuff like that. But in terms of the art, you know, I I have to imagine designing for a horror game is presents a unique set of challenges over other kinds of genres, right? Because number one, like fear and horror is so subjective. What people find creepy and scary is so different from one person to the next. But horror is also kind of drenched in tropes, right? And it's really easy to just fall into those tropes. So, what challenges did you guys face specifically when designing for a horror game? And what were some of those pitfalls that you guys were trying to avoid collectively as a team?
Okay, so I'll for me definitely my I really like horror games, but my go-to a lot of the times was too dark, was too like body horror or like almost it just looks like it's from not our game. So a lot of early concepts for all of the different enemies in the game that I got to work on. Um, some of the early designs are just so much like scarier or darker or creepier than like what we wanted to go for. So that was definitely a thing. Is I just am so influenced by other games like Resident Evil and Silent Hill, where some of these enemies, I don't think you would refer to any of them as likable. Any of the monsters in any of those games, they're all you might like how much you dislike them, but I think there's a certain like charm or like appeal that we want to our enemies, and I missed the mark on that quite a few times during concepting phases. Um, but yeah, it is such a different game in terms of like the design of the enemies and the feel of the game that it's hard to nail that down all the time. For
Yeah. For me, it was mostly the animation and also the texturing. Actually, at first, when I started doing textures, it's like especially world textures and doing like the walls and stuff, like even me, like at the beginning, I was like, I know this is supposed to be, not dark, like 100% super dark, but I was adding this sort of blood, stains and like all these sort of gore-ish elements. And Han was like, no, let's not do that. Let's not use that. Let's just make things like, simplify them a little bit and just, yeah, do the textures more, without these elements. And also the animation, which was even more tricky because, how do you make a character move in a way that it's like it doesn't have to be like super serious in the way that the characters look or super weird. It needed to be some sort of like fine balance as well between, what's sort of works for the game, but it's not like super heavy or super like scary. And it's sort of it's scary, but it's like it's just to a certain degree. And I think that ends up being sometimes even more eerie, because it makes your atmosphere, like how you feel, the vibe you get from it. I think it ends up being more intense if it's not, always something in your face.
Yeah, the subtlety definitely, I think, adds to the experience, right? Because the moments that
Yeah,
are supposed to be scary and unsettling are quite a bit more jarring because you're not just constantly feeling the sense of dread while playing through the game. And I think
yeah,
in a lot of ways it makes it more approachable as a genre piece as well, and allows you guys to explore some of the themes within the game uh, in a deeper way because you're not focused on just intense, scary 100% of the time, and
yeah.
going to the chat here, and if anyone has any questions, if you're watching over on Steam, and feel free to drop them in, and we can answer some fan questions here too. But yeah, people just talking about the contrast of this game compared to other kinds of horror games, especially Dragon Gamer says they played it on the heels of finishing Outlast, and the contrast between those two games was amazing. And then Slightly Translucent said that's really interesting, spinning the appealing aspect into the enemies. And I know talking with, I believe it was talking with Yair, the lead writer on the game, talking about how he wanted all of these characters to have maybe not necessarily something redemptive, but uh, something that people could connect with and relate to, right? So, how did that kind of approach um, dictate your designs? Like, did you what considerations were given to the backstories? I know you mentioned just in the design itself wanting to make people kind of more visually appealing, visually approachable, but what did the process of like learning these characters' backstories and then spinning them into the art look like, or did it maybe possibly go the opposite direction where it was art first, then backstory?
I think there's so the backstories are actually uh our story guys. So Yair and I don't know the rest of the team. My bad. Uh, it's really in depth stuff. So like the backstories are super. Like the lore is pretty deep actually. Before we ever like put pen to paper trying to design the enemies. Um, and I think that some of it kind of the design elements will influence kind of how the character reads in game and like add sort of their own elements of lore to the game. But so much of it was already like planned out and designed before the fact. Um, in terms of actually like putting that in game, it's hard to talk about because most of the enemies that I've worked on, or most of the designs that I've done aren't public yet and won't be until the game releases. Um, but specifically talking about like the mysterious man, we can sort of talk about um, some of the things I was given and told about him, and then how those sort of like appeared in game, or like how they manifested in the concept itself. But yeah, so much of the story, the lore, the character designs were like fully written and planned out even before the visuals were really even thought of. So the visuals do reflect who the character is, like at their core, because the characters were pretty well written and designed before any sort of art was made.
Uh, and then before we jump into talking about the mysterious man specifically and showing off some of that artwork, I did want to ask about just kind of your individual inspirations walking into this project. Would be that other horror games, other horror franchises, or even things outside of that horror scope that you look to uh, when you were sitting down to do your job on the game.
Can I get you to repeat that question? I don't know if it was for me, but I just ended up reading chat
Oh,
and missing that. I apologize.
yeah, no, absolutely. I was just curious about the inspirations that you guys came into the game with, like whether that's other horror games, other horror media, or even things outside of it that you just looked at to kind of inform the work that you were doing. And either one of you can take
Um,
that.
I don't think I had particularly anything in mind aside from, the games that I've played before, the horror games that I've played before. And yeah, I used to listen to a lot of cheerful music. Like I was listening to this sort of like very bubblegum music. But yeah, I mean, it was like a fun experience. But I was basically, yeah, listening to a lot of like cheerful stuff. So maybe it was to counterbalance the character a little bit. This sort of this mysterious man.
And how about you, Josh?
I So I think a thing that I actually had to actively do was try to steer away from the influences that I would typically have going into a horror game or something, because so much of what we're trying to do was so different than the things that like I typically consume. So I'm sure that a lot of the influence did come from things that I've just played in the past, like some of the colorfulness, like is really reflective of like Blizzard games. I think that never actually played any of the Dark Soul games, oddly enough. But their character designs are really cool. They're just so iconic. They're really fun with the way they play with shapes. They do tend to be dark and again a very different genre of game. But I do see some of those things sort of shining through in some of the designs, particularly later in the game. But yeah, I think that actively I had to try to stay away from things that I knew. Um, Penn again also came through with, as we get into the Mysterious Man, a bunch of different references that he wanted to be part of the thought process and the design of the character. And I think that when we get into those too, you'll see where those like influences played in and like how some of those similar like design elements kind of made it into the final piece too.
Yeah. Well, we've been talking a lot about the Mysterious Man and talking about when we get to it. So I finally want to jump into it because I think this is where uh, the conversation is going to get really interesting. Kind of seeing this process uh, playing out in its stages. So, like I said at the top, the Mysterious Man already kind of a central figure in the In Sound Mind universe. He's the character you see in the middle of the box art. He is you see him multiple times within the demo as well, sometimes lurking in the shadows. Um, and so I want to talk about kind of the development of the Mysterious Man from the concepting phase all the way through him actually being in the game. And so, so Josh, I know you were sharing with us earlier that this was kind of the your test project, right? When coming on to onto We Create stuff. So, what was that conversation like to get the ball rolling around how to design the Mysterious Man?
Yeah, so this was actually, as you were saying, this was my art test for the job essentially. Um, and it was pretty involved and it was kind of cool because it was such a central piece to the game. It was like a lot of responsibility to try to take on. Um, but as we talked about it, there's a really big like 2 page long um, like concept art document that Hen and Ito had sent to me, and I can read you just the tiniest tidbits from it. Most of it's redacted because a lot of it is actually about the character himself and like the role he plays, how he relates to the story, and things like that. To really give like a big context picture to the character. Um, but I'll read you just like purely like this tiny like snippet of like what the visuals were. And I was told this is a quote. The mysterious man has a thin figure with a torn off detective coat and a hat, with a really creepy face, in parentheses, deformed or so. Has a lit cigarette and a camera. Consider 1990s equipment. And that was the visual reference, or like the visual prompt I was given. And from there, I was told that good visual references were Dick Tracy, Nick Valentine from Fallout 4, Puppet Master slash String Puller, which I think is more just like that's sort of his role. Uh, the Thin Man from XCOM, Crooked Man from The Conjuring, or Slender Man were all visual references that like we knew that was sort of a direction we wanted to go in. Uh, and I think a lot of those like really gave me a pretty concise picture of like what the character should look like, and along with the bigger descriptions of the role he plays and sort of who he is, really helped make. Oh, someone said they can't hear me very well. I don't know if that's better. Um, but yeah, so that was sort of what I was given to sort of start the ball rolling. Uh, and there's a lot there, but there's also like a lot of room to like change and make things our own too.
So when you get a kind of a high level concepting document like that with these example characters, especially, how do you go about kind of parsing through what elements from those characters you want to pull in, or are you more so looking at kind of the group as a whole and saying, well, they all kind of have these things in common?
I think a big thing for me is like going and seeing the reference like one time and like making sure I have a picture in my head. And all of those references do have a lot of things in common in terms of sort of like what kind of outfit they're wearing. They tend to be like taller, skinnier people. Uh, vaguely humanoid or like slightly off humanoid, sort of like this detective aspect. There's a lot of things there that carry over, and I think for me, it's uh, it's about sort of getting a picture in mind and then like putting the reference away so that I don't copy from it too directly, and kind of pulling from memory of like, oh, I kind of think it was like this, or like these are like some overarching elements that they all share, and sort of pulling those things together, but trying not to like reference from them too directly, more just getting like, okay, that's the style of character we're going for.
Yeah, and I think looking at
Yeah.
it. Oh, go ahead, Peter.
Oh, I was just gonna say it's not so much of a direct reference. It's more of like I guess overall reference for how the character is supposed to sort of transmit, or sort of like the vibe. It's not so much when there's like a reference like say Slenderman. It's not that the character is obviously not going to be like Slenderman. Um, it's mostly like an overview of sort of how kind of it it goes, and that applies to the texturing as well. It's sort of like there's some elements in these characters that they have that make them spooky that I sort of I checked, but it's not like I was directly referencing from these characters, just having them in mind when I'm texturing it.
So let's actually jump into some of the artwork and show it off here. So I believe this is the first image that you wanted to show, Josh. Can you kind of just walk us through what we're seeing and at what phase of the design these concepts were being considered?
Okay, so this was the very first thing that I had turned in to Hen and Ito through the for the art test, or basically these are the very first sketches or designs that we had at all for the game. Um, and so we basically knew that he was going to have a top hat, a trench coat, and should be creepy. And there wasn't a ton else. There were some things that we knew about the story that I wanted to kind of portray through this also, uh, but sort of um, trying to keep things relatively varied. The A through D were almost thought of as like various like stages, like maybe this is the same guy and like could progress and like get creepier looking throughout the game, or maybe we just pick one of them. Uh some wildly different styles, like G, for example, doesn't even look human. And sort of trying to figure out like what is the direction we like for this guy's face was sort of the first piece here. um, and you'll see like some of the elements of like C and B, or A, B, and C really do end up uh, sort of making up a good bit of what the final design is going to end up looking like. And these other ones I think were cool designs, but some of them, kind of like I was saying, G feels like an entirely different game than what we have ended up making. I the same way. I think that the last design there, I, is really cool, but it doesn't feel. It feels in some ways like scarier or darker than I think what we actually wanted to go with.
Mhm.
And yeah, I this is the first piece here, I guess, and I'm really happy with a lot of these designs. Actually, I really like F. He's a completely different character, but man, does he creep me out.
Yeah, I was going to mention F. He kind
Yeah.
of gives off that like '60s detective vibe, almost. Like kind of an aging, very very wise. So I also just love the diversity of all these. So you put together these 9 concepts. What is the conversation like once these are delivered over to the rest of the team? Or do you kind of go through them individually and talk about the strengths and weaknesses, things that you like, things that you don't like, or is it more of like my gut really is drawn to this one, and so let's run with that?
Most often, what ends up happening is so Ken is always the sort of the final voice in any decision making. But generally, we'll all kind of talk about things we like and don't like. And more often than not, it's not like, oh, I really love C, let's go with that. It's I love the mustache from A, the like, I don't know, eyes from F, the like textures on H or whatever. And we sort of like take those things and mash them together and see does it feel better with all the elements we liked across all the different pieces. And more often than not, that ends up becoming what the final design is. It's just a couple rounds of this like monster mash of taking the pieces that are really working and putting them into a next piece.
And then Pedro, at what point are you considering, like, when you're looking at concepts of, I think this one would be better to animate within the world? Like, at what point do you hop into the discussion with that kind of input?
Well, from when the concept is shown, all the team can pretty much do any feedback. Even Victor, who does the rigs, he can give feedback on some because sometimes something looks really cool, but it can be like a pain in the to animate. So it's like, so I usually, when it comes to concept, I sort of also try to see what can be look really cool to texture. So usually I try to bring up my side of things when it comes to what's going to be interesting visually. Also, like when I'm about to texture it, like what sort of cool stuff can I use for it? Like this sort of like ink drinking effect on the character. It's sort of so I sort of keep my eye out for this sort of cool stuff that can be added and details from it. But yeah, usually just like Josh said, we usually, and pretty much anyone on the team can like say, I love the element from E. It could look really cool with the eyes from G, and etc. So yeah, this is pretty much the workflow that we use for it, and I think it's really cool because everyone can have like their input on it. So yeah, I'm not sure if that answers.
Yeah, no, I love that collaborative approach, right? Like, it's not
Yeah,
just one person putting something out and that's it. I think
yeah,
any kind of work is better than when you have experts in their area involved in the discussion. So
yeah.
so from here, let's go now to these are more like kind of body style and posture concepts. So walk us through what we're seeing here, Josh.
Okay, give me just 1 second to catch up.
I'll make these a little
Sorry.
bigger.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, so this is the second thing I said. So we're kind of going in order of like the different iterations or passes that got sent over.
So these are
so
are these all different like steps of the conversation? Like, that first image was sent over, feedback, and then this, or was this more of like a portfolio? Okay.
So I had sent over the portraits first. I thought if we can get like an idea for like the face of the image that we like, then like maybe that can help influence like what sort of body might match that face. So we talked a little bit about the faces first. We didn't come up with like a final decision or anything at that point. So going into this one, we just wanted to talk about like what does the body of this character look like, and the main things we decided is we knew we wanted them to be tall, a little on the skinnier side, not necessarily like so like D isn't quite, I wouldn't call him like thin, but just a taller, not bulky person. So we played with. I knew that he was going to be smoking a cigarette. That was a big thing early in his development. Was we knew just a couple like things that he'd be doing, and one of them was maybe the idea of having like trails of smoke or something leading to him, or like as a sign that he'd been wherever he was. So I sent these over, and these are just super loose sketches of like what the character could look like, and giving an idea for the body. So C1 and C2 was actually, I had the idea that maybe he like stumbles around and looks like small or weird or moves strange and drunk or something. And as you get closer, he just like stands up straight in this like incredibly impossibly tall man who's like fully composed. like how that moment might feel like a shock to the player when they thought it was one thing and now it's another thing. So those are some of the things that were kind of thought about during this. As you can see, C1 and C2, his clothes are like relatively put together. D kind of has like almost tentacly things going on with him. B has claws and just like super tattered cloak. A's got the, I don't know, the like anti-gravity tattered things and like hand wraps. And I guess as we keep going, you'll see that some of these elements made it into the next stage also, and some of them don't. But one thing that we really liked was the C2, him standing really straight and like being tall. I don't know how much that made it into his final game presentation, but that was like a pretty clear direction as we liked sort of this posture for C2.
Yeah, actually, I think this even changed, during the animation of the character. Like at the beginning, the character was had much more of this sort of posture, and we ended up, making the character be a bit more upright when it comes to, the animation side of things.
Yeah, and I think
So
when you're looking at all these concepts as well, they kind of communicate different.
movement, yeah.
Well, they communicate different movement, but they also, to me, communicate different kind of roles that that character plays within the game, right? Like the C1, especially the one that's kind of slouched over, to me looks more like maybe a creep you would encounter in a kind of a game rather than like the main villain in a game, right? And so I think it's cool, like just from seeing these, how you can already in my mind, I'm like starting to develop backstories and understanding of who these characters are.
Yeah. I'm a bit biased, so I usually think, what is a character gonna like look like?
Mhm.
So I'm trying to think, is this gonna be tricky to animate? But yeah.
Yeah, C1 definitely looks a little trickier to animate, and the
Yeah,
tentacles on D would probably be pretty tricky as well.
that would that would be the trickiest, I think.
All right, let's
Yeah, for sure.
so now we're starting to see them kind of coalesce here into more of like, I guess, 3D shapes now.
Yeah. So again, I'm slightly behind, but I assume we're looking at the ABC
Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
three fully painted ones. Okay, cool.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Oh,
this was the immediate step after that. So the silhouette and the general design is actually pretty similar to what we saw in C2, the last one. But you can see some of these other elements of like the mummified thing and the floaty pieces of cloth coming up there. We knew that we wanted him to have a camera. So in one on the right, actually, there's supposed to be a camera in his pocket. But the strap, the various camera designs, the hats are slightly different. Playing with like how maybe like decayed or whatever this these like holes and things in his skin are, um, and sort of trying to come up with like a tone for him. Um, and these like we're getting really close to a final design already on this guy. Um, and I think that so like A and C end up being pretty close to what the finished piece looks like. B, I don't remember where the mask idea came from, but I think it just ended up feeling too Nick Valentine from Fallout, which was a big. We didn't want to go too far down that route. Um, so I think A and C are pretty close to the final here, and I think at this point people can really start getting a feel for like what the character is going to look like in game as we start adding color and texture to the whole thing.
yeah. A is super super close to the final. It's pretty much, I think.
All right, so now I've got the image A through H, where it looks like we're kind of exploring maybe different expressions, or it feels like you've got kind of the overarching direction of the face down. It's just how do we want to present the details of it?
Right. And so this is an interesting one because up until this point, we've been drawing him at like this weird angle where he's like looking down his nose at you. So I was trying to come up with like what do the details of his face look like without really changing the core of the design too much. Um, so this one and the next one, it really was just about sort of trying different combinations of things, and you'll see some of these same details carry over from one piece to another. Like, what if he had like sealed shut eyes, but like a nose? What if he had that same eyes with no nose? What if his neck was weird? And just trying to get a feel for like, do any of these like do any of these feel right? Do any of them feel like what Hen has pictured in his mind? Because again, I feel like across the board, Hen has a very clear design of like or image in his head of what this character should and shouldn't look like. So he was able to pretty quickly narrow down the things he does and doesn't like, and these really open up a conversation to be able to very quickly see like what things are working and aren't working versus if we had this conversation without the visuals saying like, oh, what if he had like no nose? What if he had like two slits for a nose? What if his neck was weird? Like those are hard questions to like picture in people's heads. But these are more like conversation aids to sort of get to as quickly as possible to the final piece.
I love H because he just looks like he's like an uncle making a weird face
Yeah.
at a kid.
My personal favorite, I think it's E, because E, I sort of feel like he's judging me, you know. So like,
Yeah, I could see that. So was it is D kind of the closest to what's in
I
game?
so there's another page of these actually.
Oh, there it is.
There's
Yeah, here we go.
so it wasn't just these 8. There's even more, and even between some of the stages we've shown, there were some back and forth too. These are just sort of a snippet of the process. Um, but yeah, so even just like toying with like what do his glowing eyes look like? Because I think we decided by this point that we did want his eyes glowing. Uh, and some of them like randomly N. Something about like adding a slight amount of black hair makes that guy feel like a terror to me.
Mhm.
Uh, but yeah, so there's such subtle changes between each of these, but we really were getting close to what the final design would be. And I think somewhere between D on this one and L on between D and L between the two of them ends up being pretty close to what the final design is. As we move into doing uh, the orthographics, which are the images that Victor would use to actually make the final model in game.
Right, and that's these this image right here that isn't colored in, correct?
Yeah. Um, and this actually looked different when I turned it in. It was more on just a white background. But to make sure this showed up well on stream, I sort of darkened the background, so now it looks a little more cut out. Um, but yeah, so this is what Victor would use to sort of make the 3D model and sort of see the character from all sides. Um, and then I guess we can't talk too much about that since Victor isn't here today. But yeah, so this was basically the final piece that I turned in for this character, and what ended up going on to be the finished piece.
So
I can,
oh, go ahead, Pedro.
or I can say, however, that I think this was super helpful for Victor, at least from what I remember. So yeah, but also for me because these specific goals to where where to draw. It's very helpful to have this sort of orthographic drawing of it to know where all the details are. It made my job also way easier. So yeah, thanks, Josh.
Yeah, no problem.
So from the time you got the kind of concept sheet to the time you delivered this piece right here, rough estimate how much time goes into designing a character like this?
Actually, if you give me 1 second, I have the Discord chat from when I started to when I finished. I think.
Oh, I thought it was. I logged
Oh,
all of my time.
uh, I guess 2.5 weeks or so. maybe 3 weeks, just about.
Oh wow! So I was expecting it to be a much longer timeline, but things. So you're basically just kind of working with real time feedback, just about kind of in delivering each of these steps.
Yeah, so I guess at this point too, this was the only thing on my plate for In Sound Mind. Again, it was my first piece,
Mm-hmm.
so it got different as the project went on, and there were like more sort of uh, things to focus on. But at this point, it was just this one piece, so it was sort of like a send this off, like get it approved or get a clearer picture, and then like iterate on it and send it back. So yeah, I guess 2.5 to 3 weeks was the whole process up until this point, which
Mm-hmm.
still for like an indie game, I feel like things have to move a little faster. Um, and that like it being a small team means that like if I'm taking a long time, it's holding up like the next people in line when we have so few people working on it. That's not to say that it was rushed at all. It was a pretty dedicated couple of weeks getting it done.
Yeah. So for that 3 weeks, you were just focused on the mysterious man.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
at this point, Pedro, this is where you kind of take the wheel on a lot of this, correct? And so, kind of talk just a little high level about what it is that you do with a character once it's delivered, once the like concept is delivered to you.
Yeah, when it comes to texturing and translating things to to how it looks, like to how it looks in the final, it can be a bit tricky. But for me, it was not that tricky. It actually went super smooth to do like this character in specific. Um, Usually when you try to translate something from 2D to 3D, it can sometimes things can look just not as interesting and washed out or something. But you know I put an excellent effort in making it look like it was more popping, and like try to get the colors as close as possible to the concept art. And I try to basically give a very accurate translation of what the character would look like,
Mm-hmm.
when it goes to to texturing. And also I iterate on it quite a lot with everyone on the team, like can see what's going on. And yeah, so it was a fun process. It didn't take that long. I think it took like a week,
Mm-hmm.
maybe a bit less. And I was also doing like prop texturing at the time, so I was also texturing props. But yeah, I mean, luckily I'm at the end of the chain of the workflow, so I don't have any pressure on me. So yeah.
Speaking of how fun the process was, I do want to share this other piece of artwork that Josh sent over, where we have the mysterious man wearing what appears to be one of those classic disguises of a mustache, nose, and sunglasses. Was this something that was actual consideration, or were you just playing around with some of the concepts?
No, this was actually a planned thing that he was supposed to have originally. Was our our hope was that seeing him from a distance, you might assume that he did have sort of a nose and mustache, and that this sort of was his like his more human face. And then later in the game, you would maybe find this nose, mustache, glasses combo somewhere, and be like, "Oh no, he's not." But it'd be like sort of a silly reveal, but also like I don't know. These were some of the things that we'd like considered at one point. They did not make it into the final game, but it was fun, sort of playing around with the idea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was also interesting to do all these mustaches. Like it's yeah, it looks funny, but I think maybe it's a bit on the overly funny part, because it does look pretty funny. So I mean,
Yeah, especially
I
when
think
yeah, especially when you just have a second to like sit and and look at it, which is not something you generally get to do with horror villains, right? But yeah, here
Yeah.
just statically, it comes across as kind of comedic.
Yeah. I guess we were trying to add like, some, because this character is like so, disfigured. We wanted to sort of like try to, add some elements that were like try to counterbalance it, but I don't think at the end of the day was needed.
Mm-hmm. So now we're getting into some of the accessories and the elements. So is this something that you put together, Josh, or is this something that you handle, Pedro?
It's there's a little bit of a delay. Oh yeah, these ones. Well, I think yeah, they were from the concept. They were already from the concept, and then Victor did the 3D model, and then I, basically textured them. And yeah, basically it was basically that. You can actually see like the cigarettes pack and like the cigarette, which I'm very personally proud of doing because I don't know, I thought it was very fun to do the design and everything. Um, but yeah, uh, also the hat was quite fun to do. But yeah, we didn't end up using the cigarettes and the pack.
Is
I
there
think I'm not sure if you'll see it. Maybe not.
is there a story behind the brand name Cruel or Cruel or?
Don't think so. I think it was just like a random name that we figured out.
All right, let's see. And then we have some more texturing here. The body texturing pass. So you're just kind of fleshing out the design. So talk to us a little bit about this process.
Yeah. Well, as you can see, the first one is very rough. Looks very doesn't look great, but this was basically you know just to give an idea of sort of how the base would look like and how the direction was going to. So yeah, basically, that was just like the first test I did for the character. It's like added made the jeans and the coat. The face is just it's like very bland, but you know it was enough to sort of see if this was going well in this direction of the artwork. So that was the first one. The second one, I started adding some details, like some extra normal maps and details and whatnot. And yeah, and we kept iterating, and at that point I think I realized the colors were a bit washed out in comparison to the concept art. So I took a step back and I was like, okay, I need to look at a concept and like really take notes of how like the colors look and how what parts of the character are like slightly more dirty or like darker, and what sort of colors are being used for that. So yeah.
So within these concepts, we're kind of seeing uh, the mysterious man in almost a vacuum, right? Like he's not in his setting, he's not in the lighting that's going to be in the final game. At what point, when you're kind of deciding on the colors within the the texturing here, at what point are you considering the environment that he's going to be put in? Because most of the time when he shows up, it's in a much darker scene, right?
Yeah. I just imported the character into the maps, basically, and like just tested in a few maps. Okay, this character looks good. Looks good here. Looks good here. Here, okay,
Mm-hmm.
it's good. But yeah, there was a lot of back and forth. Like I was going back and forth on the texturing software and the game engine. I was just like comparing. Okay, looks good, and then going again to the concept art to compare it to. So yeah, basically just going back and forth a lot, and you know, making sure that it looks good.
And Josh, are you still kind of involved in these conversations at this point, or do you move on to something else? Are you giving feedback?
I do give feedback at this point, but a lot of times it's looks great, and that I mean, honestly, it looks great. So yeah, I don't know how involved I am, especially because when the thing isn't in the scene, like you were saying, it's hard to judge what these colors are going to look like in context.
Mhm.
Uh, so at this point, I guess I'm able to give feedback, but a lot of the time, there's not much that needs to be said.
Right. All right. Well, let's talk zoom in a little bit on the mysterious man. Talk about the face texturing here. I like this because it looks almost like clay modeling to an extent.
Yeah. Okay, hold on. Delay. Okay, there you go. Um, yeah, pretty much. I started with just like a base, skin, uh, just like this sort of weird, samey texture, and then I started adding like this sort of like redness, and I just went from there. But it's a very, I guess, extensive process also, because you have to take a lot of breaks and like get back to it and look at it and being like, okay, this works. And sometimes you take a break and then you return to it and you're like, well, that's a bit weird. I don't know why I did that. So there's a lot of iterations, and then once you're like, okay, I think this works. I'm gonna send a picture to the team to see, for them to see. But yeah, I think there were actually like there were a lot of iterations that I did, but these are the fundamental ones, that the fundamental steps basically. But all the teams saw, because kept posting screenshots of how it's looking, and yeah, everyone is free to roast on the textures. Free like to say it looks bad if it does look bad. I think that's very helpful. But I'm very happy with how it turned out to be.
These early ones, especially 2 and 3, are really uh like trypophobia triggering. Like the fear of stuff with
Yeah.
holes in it. Was that kind of an intentional thing within the design? And then was it even more intentional to kind of maybe scale it back later on in these later models?
I don't know. So from the concepting phase, like just really anything that looks something that tends to work really well in horror is if you feel almost bad for the thing you're looking at. So if you have a monster and it looks like the monster is in pain, so like when there's like exposed flesh or like spikes going like through it, a lot of the time we as humans still like relate to that creature and the horrible pain it must be going through, and that in us creates like this like fear response, which is also like a could that happen to me? Like, is this thing contagious? It's sort of just a base human fear. So I think throughout a lot of the concepts, there's just various levels of disfigurement in a way that looks a little painful. And I think this is the one that we end up, or like, this is the one that we end up settling on. But I don't know that I ever really like put that much thought into like, oh, like what? I'm sorry, what is it called? The
The
the fear of
trypophobia.
holes. Yeah, I don't know
Yeah.
that I ever actually actively thought of that so much as what is a thing that's going to make this guy look
Mhm.
human but unsettling. We're like human enough, but also like, ooh, I don't want that. So yeah, I hope that answers the question because I forgot it.
I actually, I've always been aware of like trypophobia. When I was doing the texture, I was thinking that I gotta make like the holes like really dark, because then it's like it pops more the effect. I think I added a bevel, like a slight bevel around the whole, so it's like even more reinforced. So I think, at least from my end, it was a bit intentional, and the ink dropping, although it was like from the concept, I think it reinforces also that it's like it's sort of, it's very visual. When you look at it, it's like it sort of burns into your into your mind, and I think that's important to make an enemy impactful. I think that's super cool to sort of have that sort of primal response to it. To have sort of this character. You know,
Yeah. And
is
then
whether it's like, yeah. Sorry.
oh no, go ahead.
Oh, I'm saying whether it's like whatever type of character, it's like I think it's something that it's important to have to do, like at least one element that sort of makes the character have an impact. Although that's mostly comes from the ideas and the concept, but I try to reinforce it
Right.
basically.
Yeah, and then we have the final textures here, everything kind of coalescing, coming together.
Yeah, kind of coming together. It's kind of separate at the same time.
Yeah.
Like the eyes.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
honestly I love seeing the texture of what is essentially his skirt, the bottom piece of the trench coat. Like the alpha on that with the tears and stuff, I think just looks so cool.
Thanks. Yeah, I put a lot of effort into that coat. I put a lot of love into the coat. And yeah, if you see the things separated, it's because when you're texturing, it's a good idea to have the meshes separated, so you can texture them way easier and not be like interfering with all the other meshes around. So that's why all the things are sort of um, you know apart from each other, basically. Yeah.
And does that also help allow, like, when you get to animating, just making sure that the parts that are going to be visible, like say the jeans underneath the skirt of the trench coat, you know,
Yeah.
still keep like their visual fidelity if that skirt's animated.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of detail into these genes. So yeah.
They
Yeah.
look very expensive given the number of holes that are in them. So
Yeah, they're designer brand.
yeah.
Definitely.
Well, now I want to jump into the actual animations, because you did send over some animation. So let's look at this first peeking animation that we have here.
Without too many spoilers,
What's that?
of course. Without too many spoilers,
Yeah,
of course. So that's
yeah,
why
exactly.
there's a lot of animations there. Not too many.
So I love
But
how playful a lot of the stuff that you guys sent over is, from the stuff in the concept art to even these animations. So yeah, talk to us a little bit about what we're seeing here, Pedro.
we'll see a lot of mustaches.
Yes.
So by the way, that's something that I don't even see anymore because they're just there. So when I'm animating the characters, sometimes I don't even notice that that the mustaches are there. It's so silly when you're showing it to someone. So it's like the person is like, "Huh, what's that on? What's happening? What's that situation over there?" But yeah, this is basically a picking animation. For when the character sort of does this sort of thing, and the player, spooks out the player.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if I can. No, I don't think I can say much more about this one.
All right.
But yeah, it's a bit playful. Yeah, there's a little bit of. I try to have this sort of like jerky, movements. This sort of yeah.
And is that what you're dialing in at this point? Is just kind of the flow of the movement and how each of the kind of individual parts of the character move around?
Yeah, yeah. It's mostly, we also iterate a lot. We show, for example, just a very simple animation, sort of like from point A to B, and get some feedback from it. You say like more playful, less playful, more cartoony, less cartoony. That's basically and again, like anyone on the team can comment on it, so it's super cool.
I think one really cool thing about these animations is they are in themselves kind of silly. The way he peers around the corner or like pops up like that are both pretty silly animations, but in the context of a horror game, even seeing like these silly movements out of like the corner of your eye is absolutely terrifying. So it's sort of that fun mix of like, oh, it's scary, but also it's like it's a little silly. It's a little bit playful. He's a little bit like, I don't know, trolly on top of being scary. There's sort of like a, I don't know, almost like a self-awareness that he is like a villain, like from the looks of it. Like he's sort of playing into the role, it looks like.
Yeah, that definitely comes across in this animation, Pedro, with the tiptoeing. It's the classic. I'm trying to sneak around like a cartoon character.
Someone make a meme out of this. um, but yeah, this is one animation that I chose to show because I love it so much, and it's one of the creepiest things, to see this happening in front of you. So yeah, it's definitely top tier. It's on the S tier, and it's not my personal preference for animations. Is like this one is like one of the best in the game. Because I love it so much.
Yeah,
it is again really funny and also like can be terrifying to see in game, which is silly that it's almost that reaction of like when you're alone in your house, you've just watched a scary movie and like I don't know, the house settles and like your closet creaks and it just like scares you so deeply. And then you're like, oh, like it's not that scary. So there is like this sort of like balance of like he is scary, he is lurking, you don't know his intentions, but also like there's such a like a lightness and a playfulness that kind of like goes through the rest of the game. Uh yeah, so and he's a complex character too. Like everyone is, as I said earlier, the story guys did such a great job at like making huge amounts of depth in the story, and all of the characters sort of have like this uh, complete picture of themselves that they aren't just this one flat thing. And the mysterious man is one of those also, or has those same elements also.
Yeah.
So now we just want to show kind of the final uh the mysterious man actually in game here in these final screenshots, so you can kind of see how we started from a document with a bunch of words and characters. And I think the coolest thing to me in this conversation was hearing those lists of visual references that you mentioned at the beginning. Dick Tracy, Nick Valentine, the Thin Man, the Crooked Man, Slenderman, and how knowing that list now, I can look at the final product in the game and kind of see how those inspirations kind of play towards it. You get the Dick Tracy and the Nick Valentine with kind of the old school detective style. You get the Slenderman with the very long lines. But there's nothing about it that makes me instantly look at it and be like, that's a Nick Valentine ripoff. That's a Slenderman ripoff. Like so I think it's cool to see how what was once words on a page are now like in game, can be interacted with. And so what does that process mean to you guys, and seeing how each of your individual steps kind of culminate in this final product?
For me, getting to this point when I can see the final model in game animated, when I can play the game and like interact with the character, it's just like the most satisfying thing in the world. Even more so, so when the demo came out, I just like went on Twitch and watched people play the demo, and it was just so delightful watching people like respond and react to something that I'd helped design and create. So it's super cool seeing like everything finally come together. The awesome modeling that Victor did, the textures and the animation that Pedro did. We haven't talked too much about him, but Custom Phase is our tech art guy. So like some of the glowing effects and the things that he does on all the characters, seeing everything sort of come together when it was once, I mean, at one point just a description, but then eventually a drawing and like being able to see it like move. And I mean, it just, it's incredible to see.
Yeah, Custom Phase just killed it. He's done like some particle effects on this character as well, and they look just mind blowing. They look really really cool.
And then, we referenced the key art earlier, and this is the key art was put together by the team at Modus, but obviously all of the characters are in it that you guys have worked on, and there we have the Mysterious Man front and center there as well. So just really cool to see the process and hear you guys' thought process in each of these individual steps, and seeing how input from the team all culminated and came together for this final design for this character, guys. I'm super excited to see what else you've cooked up for in the game, because we've only seen a portion of it within the demo, and I know there's plenty more for people to experience. But we're gonna go ahead and wrap things up now. I appreciate you guys giving us some time, and if you guys want to see if you can spot all of the appearances of the Mysterious Man in the demo of In Sound Mind, you can play that right now for free. Just head on over to the Steam page, download it, and it's a sizable demo. Like, it's you get to play through the first tape, you get to meet some characters. So yeah, go try that out. See if you can spot all of the instances of the Mysterious Man popping up and lurking in the background. And In Sound Mind is coming out on August 3rd. It's going to be on Steam. It's going to be on PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series S and X as well. And it's also coming to Switch. So you can, I'm trying to remember, you can wishlist on Steam. Definitely you can play the demo on Steam. And I don't think pre-orders are available yet, but stay tuned to our channels, and we'll have pre-orders live on all the various platforms before it releases. But Josh, Pedro, thank you so much for your time and for sharing this awesome art, and I can't wait to see what else is in game.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. I do want to say also, so I could be completely wrong, but I saw that there was pre-orders available on GameStop recently.
Oh, yes.
So don't quote me on that.
Yeah, physical.
So physical copies you might be able to pre-order already as well. Just as a quick shout out. But yeah, thank you so much for having us, and thank you everyone for being here. Yeah,
and then also, if Slightly Translucent says, Josh, you're on Twitch, right? So if you guys want to shout out any place people can find you, feel free.
Yeah, I am on Twitch. I stream most weekdays. You can head over to my Twitch to find out what my hours that I stream there are. Otherwise, I'm on Instagram, Twitter, everywhere. It's Josh Culp Art, all one word. Josh Culp, JoshCulpArt. But yeah, most social medias you can find me.
Pedro, anywhere people can find you?
I don't have. I'm untraceable.
I don't think you can find him at his house.
maybe my personal Instagram, but it's like I just put a bunch of stupid stuff there, so it's not. But I think once the game comes out, maybe search my name, and I might have a website ready by then. So yeah.
Otherwise, you'll just have to type numbers in your phone until it connects to Pedro, and you can talk to him there. That's right. Just keep going till you get the right one. But if you want to keep up with all of the other Modus titles, you can follow us on Twitter at Modus_games. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ModusGames. And then we also stream quite a bit over on Twitch, twitch.tv/Modus Games as well. And yes, physical pre-orders are available. Digital pre-orders are not currently available, but hopefully we'll have news on that soon. But guys, until next time, have a great Steam Next Fest. Try out a bunch of awesome demos that are available, but definitely check out the In Sound Mind demo, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.